Abraham Lincoln did not come into office as a soldier. He had no formal military training, no battlefield reputation, and no illusions about how brutal the coming war would be. What he did have was responsibility for a nation that was tearing itself apart and the constitutional authority to hold it together. When the Civil War began, Lincoln became something the United States had never ever truly tested before: a civilian president forced to act as commander in chief during a war for a nation's survival. Everything that followed, every victory, every disaster, every controversial decision flowed from that reality. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
When Lincoln took office in March of 1861, the United States Army was small, scattered, and unprepared for large-scale war. Many of its most experienced officers would soon resign and join the Confederacy. There was no established command structure for the conflict of this size, and no modern doctrine for coordinating massive armies across multiple theaters, and no precedent for a president managing such a war directly. Lincoln's early moments of commander-in-chief were marked by improvisation. He relied heavily on General Winfield Scott, the aging hero of the Mexican-American War, whose Anaconda Plan called for the blocking of the South and slowly strangling its economy. While strategically sound, the plan clashed with public expectations for a quick, decisive action. The pressure for immediate results pushed Lincoln into approving offenses before the army was ready. The result was disaster. At the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, a humiliating defeat that shattered illusions of a short war. For Lincoln, it was a brutal education, and from that point forward, he understood that winning would require patience, endurance, and a willingness to learn from failure. Lincoln quickly discovered that many of his generals were either overly cautious or outright insubordinate. George McClellan, commander of the Army of the Potomac, embodied both problems. He built a powerful army but consistently refused to use it, exaggerating Confederate strength and delaying offenses. Lincoln tried encouragement, persuasion, and patience. When that failed, he tried pressure. When that failed, he removed McClellan and then brought him back, and then removed him again. This pattern would repeat with several commanders as Lincoln searched for leaders willing to fight. What set Lincoln apart was his refusal to abdicate responsibility. Unlike European monarchs who delegate war entirely to generals, Lincoln read battlefield reports, he studied maps, questioned assumptions, and issued direct strategic guidance. His grasp of the war would not be won by seizing cities, but by destroying Confederate armies. This was a crucial shift. Lincoln's insistence on coordinated, aggressive action across multiple fronts laid the groundwork for eventual victory, even when his generals resisted. As the war deepened, Lincoln exercised powers that pushed the Constitution to its limits. He suspended habeas corpus in key areas, preventing sabotage and rebellion. He authorized military assets of suspected Confederate, or he authorized the arrest of suspected Confederate sympathizers. He expanded the Army and Navy without waiting for Congress to formally approve every single flippant step. These actions sparked fierce opposition. It sounds like a president we got now. Critics accused him of tyranny. Sounds like a president we have now. I love it. Newspaper denounced him as a dictator. Even members of his own party worried that he was setting a dangerous precedent. Lincoln understood the risks, but he believed the greater danger was national collapse. Man, this just sounds like I'm reading the news from today. His view was blunt. Constitutional liberties could not survive if the Constitution itself was destroyed. Every emergency measure in his mind was justified by the overriding necessity of preserving the Union. Importantly, Lincoln never claimed these powers permanently. He framed them as wartime necessities tied explicitly to a rebellion and invasion, and that distinction would matter deeply in how history would judge him. I really, really wish people would understand this about our current president as well. Fully support what he's doing. Anyway, moving on. The Emancipation Proclamation is often remembered purely as a moral document, and it was that. But it was also military strategy. By 1862, Lincoln had concluded that slavery was the Confederacy's greatest strength. It fueled the Southern economy, sustained its war effort, and underpinned its social order. Striking at slavery would weaken the Confederacy while strengthening the Union. As commander-in-chief, Lincoln issued the proclamation as a war measure, and it applied only to the states in the rebellion, not to loyal bordered states. Legally, it was grounded in his authority to seize enemy resources during wartime. The effect was profound. It turned the war into a fight against slavery, discouraging European powers from supporting the Confederacy. It allowed Black Americans to enlist in the Union Army, adding hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and it reshaped the moral purpose of the conflict in a way that could be reversed. Lincoln did not act rashly. He waited for a military victory, Antietam, before announcing emancipation, ensuring it would be seen as strength, not desperation. Lincoln's greatest breakthrough as commander-in-chief came when he finally found generals who shared the understanding of total war. Ulysses S. Grant did not promise quick victories or easy campaigns. What he promised was relentless pressure. Grant understood that the Union's advantage lay in the manpower and industry, and that those advantages had to be applied continuously. When Lincoln promoted Grant to overall command in 1864, he effectively reshaped the war. Grant coordinated simultaneous offensives across multiple theaters, denying the Confederacy the ability to shift forces or recover from defeat. Lincoln supported Grant through horrific losses, especially during the Overland Campaign. When critics demanded Grant's removal, Lincoln refused. He famously remarked that he could not spare the general, and he fought. This partnership marked the maturity of Lincoln as a commander-in-chief. He no longer micromanaged tactics, but he never surrendered strategic oversight. Unlike military dictators, Lincoln fought the Civil War while maintaining elections, free press, and often a hostile Congress. He faced opposition not only from Confederates, but from Northern Democrats. Big surprise. Radical Republicans, we've seen those, Rand Paul, and factions within his own administration. The 1864 election was especially dangerous. With the war still raging, casualties mounting, Lincoln believed he would lose. He had been defeated, right? Had he been defeated, the Union might have sought to negotiated peace that left the Confederacy intact. Instead, the battlefield victories in the summer and the fall of 1864, made possible by Lincoln's command decision, secured his reelection. The war would be fought to its conclusion. And throughout it all, Lincoln balanced political reality with military necessity, refusing to sacrifice long-term victory for short-term popularity. Lincoln carried the war personally. He visited hospitals, read casualty lists, and met with grieving families. The weight of command aged him visibly. Photographs from 1861 to 1865 show a man transformed by responsibility. Yet he never lost sight of restraint. He rejected calls for vengeance. He often spoke of reconciliation. Even as commander-in-chief, he viewed the Confederacy not as a foreign enemy, but as a rebellion of fellow Americans who would eventually need to be brought back into the Union. And that perspective shaped how the war ended and how Lincoln envisioned peace. Abraham Lincoln did not become commander-in-chief because he sought war. He became commander-in-chief because the survival of the republic demanded it. He learned on the job, failed publicly, adapted relentlessly, and ultimately mastered the role under pressure no American president had ever faced. He preserved civilian control of the military, expanded federal power without surrendering it into permanence, and guided a nation through the greatest crisis without abandoning constitutional government. He's a great man. Thank you for listening. And I remember, history isn't boring. It's the story of a president who carried the weight of a divided nation, learned to yield power without surrendering principle, and held the Union together long enough to fight for its survival. We'll see you next time.